Maya Chen sat in her rusted Honda Civic, outside the eviction notice office, staring at the crumpled paper in her trembling hands. 72 hours. That's all she had left before losing the small apartment that had been her home for the past 3 years, in Portland, Oregon. The rain drummed against her windshield, each drop echoing the rhythm of her mounting despair. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. At 28, Maya had never imagined her life would look like this. She'd been a promising art teacher at Lincoln Elementary, beloved by her students and respected by her colleagues. But that was before the budget cuts, before the layoffs, before her modest savings evaporated trying to keep up with rent, while searching for work that seemed to exist only in her dreams. Her phone buzzed with another rejection email. Thank you for your interest in the substitute teaching position. Unfortunately, we've decided to move forward with other candidates. Maya deleted it without finishing, adding it to the growing collection of professional disappointments that had become her daily reality. The irony wasn't lost on her. 6 months ago, she'd inherited what should have been a fortune from her late father, tech entrepreneur Robert Chen. She should be secure, comfortable, maybe even wealthy. Instead, she was counting quarters for coffee and calculating whether she could afford both groceries and gas this week. Her older sister Victoria had taken care of everything after their father's sudden heart attack. Don't worry about the legal stuff, Victoria had said, her voice smooth and reassuring over the phone from her Manhattan penthouse. I'll handle Dad's estate. You just focus on grieving. At the time, it had seemed like a kindness. Victoria was the successful one, after all, the brilliant businesswoman who'd built her own tech empire and graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. Maya had been grateful to let someone else navigate the complicated world of lawyers and paperwork. But when the dust settled, Maya discovered she'd inherited only a small trust fund, barely enough to cover her father's medical debts and funeral expenses. Victoria, meanwhile, had inherited everything else. The company worth hundreds of millions, the real estate portfolio, the investment accounts, even their childhood home in Marin County, where Maya had hoped to scatter their father's ashes. Dad always said I had the business mind, Victoria had explained during their one awkward phone conversation about the will. He knew you'd be happier with something simple, something that wouldn't burden you with responsibility. The words had stung, but Maya had accepted them. After all, Victoria was probably right. Maya had never shown interest in business, had chosen teaching over the corporate world their father inhabited. Now, sitting in her dying car with an eviction notice and a bank account showing -$37, Maya wondered if her father had really intended for her to struggle like this. She remembered his words during their last conversation before his death. I've made sure both my girls will be taken care of. You'll never have to worry about money, sweetheart. Her phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but desperation made her answer anyway. Is this Maya Chen? The voice belonged to an elderly man, gravelly but kind. Yes, who's asking? My name is Harold Brewster. I was your father's attorney. His original attorney, before he switched firms about a year before his death. Maya's heart skipped. I don't understand. Victoria said she worked with Dad's lawyer to settle everything. That's exactly what I need to talk to you about. Miss Chen, I've been trying to reach you for months, but the contact information I had was outdated. I finally tracked you down through the school district. We need to meet. About what? Harold's pause was heavy with implication. About your father's real will, the one I helped him draft 2 years ago. The one that left everything split equally between you and your sister. The world seemed to tilt. Maya gripped the steering wheel, trying to steady herself. That's impossible. I saw the will. Victoria showed me. Miss Chen, I think you need to see some documents. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow morning? I'm in downtown Portland, on Morrison Street. Maya's mind raced. She had no money for parking downtown, no professional clothes that weren't wrinkled or stained, no reason to believe this wasn't some cruel joke or scam. But something in the old lawyer's voice, a sadness mixed with urgency, made her believe him. What time? 9 a.m., suite 1204. And Miss Chen? Don't tell anyone about this conversation. Not yet. After hanging up, Maya sat in the rain-soaked parking lot for another hour, processing what she'd just heard. If Harold Brewster was telling the truth, then everything she'd accepted about her father's death, about her inheritance, about her current situation, was a lie. A lie told by the sister she'd trusted, the sister she'd looked up to her entire life. The next morning, Maya used her last $20 to pay for downtown parking and took the elevator to the 12th floor of a modest office building. Harold Brewster's office was exactly what she'd expected from an old-school attorney. Dark wood, leather-bound books, and the smell of coffee and legal documents. Harold himself was in his 70s, with white hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He stood when she entered, extending a firm handshake and a sad smile. "Miss Chen, thank you for coming. I know this must be confusing." He gestured for her to sit, then pulled out a thick manila folder. "Your father came to me in early 2022, about 18 months before his death. He wanted to update his will. The previous version left everything to Victoria, but he'd had a change of heart." Harold opened the folder, revealing documents that looked official and important. He'd been watching your work as a teacher, watching how you connected with children, how you chose service over profit. He told me he'd been wrong to assume Victoria was the only one capable of handling responsibility. Maya stared at the papers, her father's signature clear at the bottom of each page. "He said," Harold continued, "that you'd proven yourself to be the daughter with real character. He wanted to make sure you'd be taken care of, but more than that, he wanted you to have the opportunity to make a difference in the world." The will Harold showed her was completely different from what Victoria had presented. In this version, the estate was split 50-50. Maya would inherit half of everything: the company, the properties, the investments. More than enough to never worry about money again. More than enough to start the educational foundation she'd dreamed about. More than enough to help other struggling teachers and underfunded schools. "But how is this possible?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Victoria showed me a will. It looked real." Harold's expression darkened. "That's what we need to discuss. After your father died, I tried to contact your sister to begin probate proceedings. She told me Dad had switched lawyers and that someone else was handling everything. She seemed to know details about his final wishes that seemed inconsistent with what I knew." He pulled out another document. "This is a copy of the will that was probated, the one your sister presented to the court." Maya looked at it, noting her father's signature at the bottom. It looked identical to his signature on Harold's documents. "They look the same," she said, confused. "That's the problem. I've been practicing law for 45 years, Miss Chen. I've seen every kind of fraud and forgery imaginable. This signature," he pointed to the probated will, "is too perfect. When people sign important documents, there are usually small variations, little imperfections. But this signature matches your father's exactly, down to the smallest detail." The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. "You think Victoria forged it?" "I think someone with access to your father's papers, someone who knew his signature well, created a false will. And I think they did it very carefully, very professionally." Maya felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Everything she'd believed about her family, about her father's final wishes, about her own worth in his eyes, was potentially a lie. But more than that, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. "What can we do?" she asked. Harold leaned forward, his eyes intense. "We can challenge the probate. We can demand a handwriting analysis. We can fight this. But I have to warn you, Miss Chen, your sister has money, power, and legal resources. This won't be easy. It will be expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally brutal. And there's no guarantee we'll win." Maya thought about her eviction notice, about her empty bank account, about the months of rejection and failure. Then she thought about her father, about his real wishes, about the foundation she could start, the teachers she could help, the children whose lives could be changed. "What do I need to do?" Harold smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "First, we need to file a motion to contest the probate. Then we need to gather evidence. And most importantly, We need to be prepared for your sister to fight back with everything she has. As Maya left Harold's office that morning, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Purpose. She might be broke. She might be facing eviction. She might be going up against one of the most powerful women in American business. But she finally had something worth fighting for. The truth. Her father's real legacy. And the chance to honor his memory by becoming the woman he'd believed she could be. The war for her inheritance was about to begin. The law offices of Sterling, Walsh and Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown Seattle high-rise, a world away from Harold Brewster's modest Portland practice. Maya stepped out of the elevator onto polished marble floors, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of Elliott Bay. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over leather furniture that probably cost more than her annual teaching salary. Harold had insisted they meet with Patricia Sterling, one of the most respected estate litigation attorneys on the West Coast. If we're going to challenge your sister, he'd said, we need someone who won't be intimidated by her legal team. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Maya tugged at the hem of her borrowed blazer, grateful that her former colleague Sarah had loaned her something professional to wear. Even so, she felt like an imposter in this temple of corporate law, where everyone moved with the confident stride of people who build their time in 6-minute increments. The receptionist, a perfectly polished woman in her 30s, looked up from her computer with the kind of smile that was warm but unmistakably professional. You must be Miss Chen. Miss Sterling is expecting you. Patricia Sterling's corner office was even more intimidating than the lobby. The attorney herself was in her 50s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and the bearing of someone who'd never lost a case she believed in. She stood as they entered, her handshake firm and her gaze direct. Harold's told me about your situation, she said without preamble. Before we discuss anything else, I need you to understand what you're considering. Your sister isn't just wealthy, she's connected. Victoria Chen sits on the boards of 3 Fortune 500 companies. She has political influence, media relationships, and access to the kind of legal firepower that can bury people in paperwork for years. Maya felt her confidence wavering. Are you saying we shouldn't try? I'm saying you need to go into this with your eyes open. Patricia gestured for them to sit at a small conference table. Estate litigation is expensive. Even with Harold's evidence, this case could take 2 to 3 years to resolve. My retainer alone is $50,000. The number hit Maya like a physical blow. $50,000 was more money than she'd ever had at one time in her life. It was more than she'd made in her best year of teaching. However, Patricia continued, studying Maya's expression, Harold's preliminary evidence is compelling. If he's right about the signature analysis, if we can prove forgery, then your sister doesn't just owe you money, she could face criminal charges. Harold opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I've had an independent handwriting expert take a preliminary look at both wills. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, she's testified in federal court over 200 times. Her initial assessment supports our suspicions. Patricia examined the documents Harold handed her, her expression growing more interested by the minute. The signatures are too consistent, she murmured, more to herself than to them. When people sign their name multiple times over several months, there are always micro-variations, pressure differences, slight tremors, minor changes in letter formation. She looked up at Maya. But these signatures are identical down to the pixel. The only way that happens is if someone traced an existing signature or used digital manipulation. Maya's heart began to race. So we have a case? We have the beginning of a case, Patricia corrected. But proving forgery is only the first step. We also need to establish that Harold's will is the legitimate one, that your father was of sound mind when he signed it, and that there wasn't coercion involved. Your sister's lawyers will attack every element of our claim. The reality of what she was facing began to sink in. This wasn't just about money. It was about going to war with someone who had unlimited resources and no apparent conscience about lying under oath. There's something else you need to know, Patricia said, her tone becoming more serious. Once we file this motion, your sister will know you're challenging her. She'll have every detail of your life investigated. Every financial decision, every relationship, every mistake you've ever made will be scrutinized and potentially used against you. Maya thought about her student loan debt, her spotty employment history, the time in college when she'd been arrested at an environmental protest. None of it seemed significant compared to potential forgery, but she understood Patricia's warning. She'll also likely cut off any remaining financial support, Patricia continued. If she's been helping with your father's medical bills or funeral expenses, that stops immediately, and she'll probably try to make your life difficult in other ways. As if summoned by their conversation, Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. Her heart stopped when she saw the sender, Victoria. Maya, I just heard the strangest thing. Someone told me you've been meeting with lawyers. I hope you're not falling for some scam artist trying to take advantage of your grief. Call me. We need to talk. Harold and Patricia exchanged glances. That was fast, Harold observed. Too fast, Patricia agreed. Either she's having you watched, or someone in the legal community is feeding her information. Maya stared at the message, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with Seattle's autumn weather. How would she know? Your sister didn't build a tech empire by being naive, Patricia said. She probably has Google alerts set for her name, your name, and anything related to your father's estate. Or she could have private investigators monitoring your activities. The paranoia that statement induced was almost overwhelming. Maya had assumed she was taking the first steps in a legal battle. She hadn't realized the battle might have started the moment she walked into Harold's office. What do I do about the message? Nothing, Patricia said firmly. Don't respond. Don't call her back. Don't give her any information about what we're discussing. From this moment forward, all communication with your sister goes through attorneys. Maya's phone buzzed again. Another message from Victoria. Maya, I'm worried about you. These lawyer people just want to take advantage of grieving families. Dad wouldn't want us fighting over money. Please call me. The manipulation in the messages was subtle but clear. Victoria was positioning herself as the caring sister, the voice of reason, while implying that Maya was being led astray by greedy lawyers. It was exactly the kind of psychological warfare Patricia had warned her about. She's good, Patricia observed, reading over Maya's shoulder. But manipulation only works if you don't recognize it. Harold pulled out another document. This is why your father changed his will, he said quietly. He'd started to see this side of Victoria. The calculated nature of her interactions, the way she viewed relationships as transactions. The document was a handwritten note in her father's distinctive script, dated just weeks before his death. Maya doesn't know her own strength yet. She thinks Victoria is the successful one because Victoria measures everything in dollars. But Maya measures things in lives changed, in children helped, in making the world better. That's the daughter I want to carry on my legacy. Reading her father's words, Maya felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about honoring his memory, about proving worthy of his faith in her, about standing up for principles over profit. Okay, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. What's our next step? Patricia smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she'd shown. We file the motion to contest probate. We demand a full handwriting analysis. We subpoena your sister's financial records to see if there are any irregularities around the time of your father's death. And we prepare for the fact that your sister is going to try to destroy you. Maya's phone buzzed a third time. Victoria again. Maya, I'm flying to Portland tomorrow. We need to sit down face to face and sort this out before lawyers get involved and ruin our family. She's scared, Harold observed. Good. That means we're on the right track. As they left Patricia's office, Maya felt the weight of what she'd committed to. She was an unemployed teacher with $37 in her bank account, preparing to take on a billionaire who apparently had no qualms about fraud and manipulation. The smart thing would be to walk away, to accept her circumstances, to believe Victoria's lies about their father's intentions. But standing in that elevator, looking out at the Seattle skyline, Maya realized she'd already made her choice. She was going to fight, not just for the money, but for the truth. For her father's real wishes. For the chance to become the woman he'd believed she could be. The war had begun, and Maya Chen was no longer running from it. Maya's first victory came from an unexpected source: her former students. Word had somehow spread through the Lincoln Elementary community about her legal battle, and by Thursday morning, her phone was buzzing with messages of support. Parents she'd taught were offering everything from spare bedrooms to small loans. Her teaching colleagues had started a GoFundMe that had already raised $3,000. The most surprising call came from Jennifer Walsh, a parent whose daughter Emma had struggled with dyslexia until Maya's innovative teaching methods had helped her break through. Jennifer, as it turned out, was a forensic accountant who specialized in corporate fraud investigations. "I've been following your sister's company for years," Jennifer explained over coffee at a small cafe near Maya's apartment. "TechVision Industries has always been interesting from a financial perspective. Very aggressive accounting practices, lots of offshore subsidiaries, the kind of structure that makes forensic accountants curious." Maya leaned forward, intrigued. "What kind of curious?" "The kind where money moves in ways that don't always make sense. Your sister's very good at making things look legitimate on the surface, but I've seen patterns that suggest she's been playing fast and loose with financial regulations for years." Jennifer pulled out a tablet and showed Maya a complex flowchart. "This is TechVision's corporate structure. 17 different subsidiaries, accounts in 12 countries, and a web of financial relationships that would take a team of investigators months to untangle. But what does that have to do with my father's estate? Possibly everything. If your sister was already engaged in questionable financial practices, forging a will to steal an inheritance would just be another Tuesday for her. But more importantly, if we can establish a pattern of financial fraud, it strengthens our case about the will." Jennifer's expertise proved invaluable when Maya met with Patricia Sterling the following week. The attorney's eyes lit up as Jennifer explained TechVision's labyrinthine financial structure. "This changes things," Patricia said, studying Jennifer's analysis. "If we can demonstrate that Victoria has a history of financial manipulation, it supports our narrative about the forged will. But more importantly, it gives us leverage." Harold, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. "How so?" "Because if we're right about the will, and Jennifer's right about the company finances, then Victoria isn't just facing a civil lawsuit. She's potentially facing federal charges. Wire fraud, tax evasion, securities violations, the kind of charges that put people in prison for decades." Maya felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The stakes were escalating beyond anything she'd imagined. The breakthrough came from the most mundane source possible: a storage unit. Maya had been avoiding cleaning out her father's belongings, the task seeming too overwhelming in her current emotional state. But Patricia had insisted they needed to search for any additional evidence of his true intentions. The storage facility in Beaverton was a grim place, all concrete and fluorescent lighting. Unit 247 contained the remnants of her father's home office items that Victoria had said were too sentimental to throw away, but not valuable enough to keep. Buried beneath boxes of old tax returns and business correspondence, Maya found something that made her heart stop: her father's personal laptop, still in its carrying case. Victoria had apparently overlooked it, or assumed it had been wiped clean. "This could be everything," Patricia said when Maya called her. "Don't turn it on, don't touch anything else. We need to get this to a digital forensics expert immediately." Dr. Marcus Rodriguez ran a computer forensics lab that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Banks of humming servers lined the walls, and multiple monitors displayed scrolling code that Maya couldn't begin to understand. "Your father was meticulous about backing up his files," Dr. Rodriguez explained as he connected the laptop to his analysis equipment. "Even deleted files leave traces, and this machine hasn't been used since about 2 weeks before his death." What they found was devastating for Victoria's version of events. Robert Chen's laptop contained multiple drafts of his will, showing a clear evolution of his thinking over the final year of his life. The earliest version, from January 2022, left everything to Victoria, but subsequent drafts showed him gradually shifting toward an equal split. More damning were the email exchanges between Robert and various attorneys. In one particularly revealing thread from 3 months before his death, he'd written, I've been watching my daughters more carefully lately. Victoria has become someone I don't recognize. Everything is about profit margins and market share. Maya, on the other hand, chose to teach children instead of chase money. She's the one with real character. But the most explosive discovery was a series of encrypted files that contained Robert's private journal entries. Dr. Rodriguez was able to decrypt them using password recovery techniques, revealing months of growing concern about Victoria's business practices. I'm worried about the path Victoria has chosen, one entry read. I built my company to create technology that helps people. She's turned it into something predatory. The way she talks about maximizing stakeholder value and optimizing human resources, it's like she sees people as numbers on a spreadsheet. Another entry, dated just 6 weeks before his death, was even more troubling. Victoria came by today asking about my estate planning. She seemed very interested in the details of my will, who my attorney was, where the documents were stored. She said she was just trying to be helpful, but something about her questions felt calculating. I'm starting to think I need to be more careful about how much I tell her. The final entry, written just days before his fatal heart attack, was chilling. I've decided to change my will again. Maya deserves half of everything I've built, but I'm not going to tell Victoria until after the papers are signed. I don't trust her reaction. Maya stared at the screen, reading her father's words through tears. He'd seen through Victoria's manipulation. He'd recognized her true nature. And he'd died before he could protect Maya from her. This establishes a motive, Patricia said grimly. If Victoria knew your father was planning to change his will again, she had every reason to make sure that didn't happen. Are you saying she killed him? Maya's voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying your father had a heart attack at age 58 with no previous history of heart disease, right after expressing concern about Victoria's reaction to his estate plans. That raises questions we need to investigate. Harold looked shaken. If that's true, if Victoria somehow caused your father's death, then this isn't just about inheritance fraud. This is about murder. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Maya had thought she was fighting for money that was rightfully hers. Now she was potentially uncovering evidence of the ultimate betrayal, a daughter who had killed her own father to steal his legacy. What do we do now? Maya asked. We build the strongest possible case, Patricia replied. We document everything, we follow every lead, and we prepare for the possibility that your sister is far more dangerous than any of us realized. As they left Dr. Rodriguez's lab that evening, Maya felt the weight of her father's laptop bag on her shoulder. Inside that machine was proof of his love for her, evidence of his real intentions, and possibly the key to exposing Victoria for what she truly was. But Maya also felt something else, the presence of her father, guiding her toward the truth he died trying to protect. She was no longer just fighting for an inheritance. She was fighting for justice, for his memory, and for the chance to honor the faith he'd placed in her. The battle was about to get much more dangerous, but Maya Chen was no longer the desperate, evicted teacher who had walked into Harold Brewster's office. She was becoming the woman her father had believed she could be, someone strong enough to stand up to evil, no matter how powerful it appeared to be. Victoria's counterattack began at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday with a knock on Maya's apartment door. Two men in expensive suits stood in the hallway, their briefcases and serious expressions immediately identifying them as lawyers. Behind them stood a woman with a camera and a third man holding what looked like official documents. Maya Chen? The taller man asked. I'm David Blackwood from Morrison Klein & Associates. We represent Victoria Chen. You're being served with a cease and desist order, as well as a defamation lawsuit seeking $10 million in damages. Maya's hands shook as she accepted the thick stack of papers. $10 million. The number was so astronomical it felt surreal. She barely had $10, let alone $10 million. You have 30 days to respond, Blackwood continued. We'd also like to inform you that my client has filed a restraining order. You're no longer permitted within 500 feet of any TechVision Industries property, including your sister's residence. The woman with the camera had been documenting everything, and Maya realized this was all theater. Victoria wasn't just trying to silence her. She was building a public narrative of Maya as an unhinged sister, making false accusations against a successful businesswoman. After they left, Maya sat on her couch reading through the legal documents, feeling overwhelmed by the aggressive legal language and accusations. According to Victoria's lawyers, Maya was engaged in a, quote, malicious campaign of harassment and defamation, designed to, quote, extort money through baseless legal claims and character assassination. The lawsuit detailed every step of Maya's investigation, from her meetings with Harold to her consultation with Patricia to Jennifer's forensic accounting work. Someone had been watching her closely, documenting her activities with disturbing precision. But the most chilling part was a psychological evaluation that Victoria's team had commissioned. Dr. Stephanie Marsh, a psychiatrist who specialized in family trauma, had written a detailed assessment of Maya's mental state without ever meeting her. The report painted her as a, quote, deeply unstable individual suffering from prolonged grief, financial desperation, and possible delusional thinking regarding her family relationships. Maya called Patricia immediately, her voice tight with panic. They're saying I'm mentally unstable. They have a psychiatrist's report claiming I'm delusional. It's a standard intimidation tactic, Patricia replied, though Maya could hear concern in her voice. They're trying to discredit you before we even get to court. But commissioning a psychological evaluation without the subject's knowledge or consent is ethically questionable at best. What about the $10 million lawsuit? Also designed to scare you. They're banking on you not having the resources to fight back. But Maya, I need you to understand something. This level of aggressive response usually means we're getting close to something they're desperate to hide. The harassment escalated throughout the week. Maya's former school district received an anonymous complaint about her mental fitness to work with children. Her landlord got a call suggesting she was involved in, quote, dangerous legal activities that might put other tenants at risk. Even her local grocery store was contacted by someone claiming she was writing bad checks. The psychological warfare was taking its toll. Maya found herself jumping at unexpected sounds, constantly checking over her shoulder, second-guessing every decision. She hadn't realized how much Victoria's wealth and influence could affect every aspect of her life. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Victoria herself. In her arrogance, she agreed to an interview with Forbes magazine about, quote, managing family relationships in high-stakes business environments. Maya was watching the interview online when something Victoria said made her freeze the video. Family dynamics can be complicated, Victoria was saying, her voice smooth and practiced. Sometimes people we love develop unrealistic expectations about what they're entitled to. As the more successful sibling, I've had to set boundaries while still trying to help Maya through her difficulties. But it wasn't Victoria's words that caught Maya's attention. It was what she was wearing. Around her neck was a distinctive necklace, a vintage Art Deco piece with emeralds and diamonds that Maya recognized immediately. It had belonged to their grandmother, and according to family tradition, it was supposed to go to the first granddaughter to get married. Maya had never married, but the necklace should have been part of her inheritance, held in trust until she did. Instead, Victoria was casually wearing it during a national television interview, displaying her theft like a trophy. Maya called Jennifer Walsh immediately. I need you to look at something, she said, sending a screenshot of Victoria wearing the necklace. This belonged to our grandmother. It's worth about $40,000, and it wasn't supposed to go to Victoria. Jennifer's forensic accounting background made her think differently about the jewelry. If she took one piece that wasn't hers, what else did she take? Maya, we need to get a complete inventory of your father's personal effects. Not just the big assets like real estate and company stock, but everything. Jewelry, art, collectibles, even family photographs. Working with Harold, they filed a motion for a complete accounting of the estate's assets. What they discovered was staggering. Over 200 items of value had been removed from their father's home before the will was probated. Everything from rare books to vintage watches to family heirlooms that had been in the Chen family for generations. The total value exceeded $300,000, all of it taken by Victoria before Maya even knew their father had died. She had systematically looted their childhood home, taking anything of value while Maya was still in shock from the funeral. But the most devastating discovery was personal rather than financial. Among the missing items was their father's wedding ring, the one he'd worn every day since their mother's death 15 years earlier. Victoria had even stolen that final connection to their parents' love story. This establishes a pattern, Patricia explained during their strategy meeting. She didn't just forge the will to get the big assets. She systematically stole everything of value, including items with deep sentimental meaning. It shows a level of callousness that will resonate with a jury. Dr. Rodriguez had continued analyzing Robert Chen's laptop and made another crucial discovery. In the weeks before his death, Robert had been researching Victoria's company finances, downloading annual reports and regulatory filings. His browser history showed he'd been looking into corporate fraud reporting and SEC whistleblower programs. "Your father was building a case against Victoria," Dr. Rodriguez explained. He discovered something about her business practices that concerned him enough to start documenting evidence. The laptop revealed Robert's growing horror as he uncovered Victoria's fraudulent activities. She had been manipulating earnings reports, hiding liabilities through shell companies, and using investor money for personal expenses. The scale of the fraud was massive, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars stolen from shareholders and creditors. One email draft, never sent, showed Robert's internal struggle. "I can't believe my own daughter has become this person. Everything I built, everything I stood for, she's corrupting it for personal gain. I have to stop her, but she's my child. How do you turn in your own daughter?" Maya read her father's words through tears, understanding now why he'd changed his will. He hadn't just been giving her money. He'd been trying to save his legacy from a daughter who had become a monster. The revelation transformed Maya's understanding of the entire situation. This wasn't just about inheritance fraud. Victoria had been stealing from everyone, investors, employees, even her own family, for years. She was a criminal who happened to be Maya's sister, not a sister who had made a mistake. "We need to contact the FBI," Patricia said grimly. "This is beyond estate litigation now. We're looking at federal crimes, securities fraud, potentially racketeering charges." Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She was no longer just fighting for her own inheritance. She was fighting for every person Victoria had cheated, every investor she'd defrauded, every employee whose pension she'd stolen. For the first time since this battle began, Maya felt truly powerful, not because she had money or connections, but because she had the truth. And the truth, her father had always told her, was the most powerful weapon of all. The scared, desperate teacher who had walked into Harold's office was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that some fights were worth everything you had to give, because losing them meant letting evil win. Victoria had underestimated her little sister. That mistake was about to cost her everything. The FBI raid on TechVision Industries happened at dawn on a Friday, just as Maya was preparing for what she thought would be a routine meeting with Patricia Sterling. Instead, her phone exploded with news alerts and calls from reporters. Victoria's tech empire was crumbling in real time, broadcast live on every major news network. Agent Sarah Martinez, the lead investigator on the Financial Crimes Task Force, had moved swiftly once Patricia provided them with Robert Chen's laptop evidence. Dozens of federal agents swarmed TechVision's headquarters in San Francisco, seizing computers, documents, and freezing accounts worth over $800 million. Maya watched the coverage from Patricia's office, feeling a mixture of vindication and terror. Victoria's carefully constructed image was disintegrating on national television. The business magazines that had once featured her on their covers were now running headlines about the tech queen's fall and Silicon Valley's biggest fraud. But Victoria didn't go quietly. Within hours of the raid, she was on every major news channel, not hiding but attacking. She appeared on CNBC looking perfectly composed in a navy blue power suit, her expression calm and controlled despite the chaos surrounding her company. "This is a vindictive witch hunt orchestrated by my unstable sister and her unscrupulous legal team," Victoria said, looking directly into the camera. "Maya has been struggling with severe mental health issues since our father's death. Instead of seeking proper treatment, She's chosen to create elaborate fantasies about inheritance fraud and corporate malfeasance. The interviewer pressed her about the FBI evidence, but Victoria was ready. My sister has been working with disgraced forensic accountants and desperate lawyers to fabricate evidence. They've manipulated computer files, created false documents, and convinced federal agents to participate in this harassment campaign. Maya felt sick watching her sister's performance. Victoria was so confident, so convincing in her lies, that Maya began to doubt her own memories. Had she somehow misunderstood the evidence? Was she really the unstable one? But Victoria wasn't finished. The real blow came that evening, when Maya's phone rang with a call from her former principal at Lincoln Elementary. "Maya, I'm so sorry to be calling about this," Linda Rodriguez said, her voice strained. "But we've received some very disturbing information about your current legal situation. The school board has asked me to inform you that your substitute teaching license is being suspended pending an investigation into your mental fitness." "What investigation? Based on what?" "We received a detailed report from Dr. Stephanie Marsh, along with court documents showing you're currently suing your sister for $10 million and making accusations about corporate fraud and murder, Maya. The board feels that someone making such serious but apparently unfounded allegations might not be suitable to work with children." Maya's teaching license, her only source of potential income, her professional identity, her connection to the work she loved, was gone. Victoria had systematically destroyed every aspect of her life while positioning herself as the victim of Maya's alleged mental breakdown. The psychological warfare intensified over the weekend. Maya discovered that her car insurance had been canceled due to, quote, risk assessment concerns provided by an anonymous source. Her bank account was frozen after someone reported suspicious activity that suggested, quote, possible money laundering related to fraudulent legal claims. Even her local library revoked her privileges after receiving complaints about her, quote, harassing behavior toward prominent community members. By Monday morning, Maya was essentially trapped. No income, no transportation, no access to her few remaining funds, and a sister who was using every resource at her disposal to paint her as a dangerous, delusional person. The breaking point came when Maya found Harold Brewster waiting outside her apartment building, his usually kind face grave with worry. "Maya, we need to talk," he said. "Victoria's legal team has made an offer." They sat in his car, Harold's hands gripping the steering wheel as he explained. "They're willing to drop all lawsuits against you, restore your teaching license, and provide you with a settlement of $200,000. All you have to do is sign a statement admitting that your accusations were false, that you were suffering from grief-induced delusions, and that you seek medical treatment for your mental health issues." $200,000. More money than Maya had ever imagined having. Enough to start over somewhere far from Victoria's influence, to rebuild her life, to escape this nightmare that had consumed everything she cared about. "There's just one more condition," Harold continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have to publicly apologize to Victoria at a press conference. You have to admit you made everything up and ask for her forgiveness." Maya stared out the car window at the apartment building, where she'd received an eviction notice just months earlier. Victoria was offering her a way out, but the price was her soul. She would have to betray her father's memory, abandon the truth he'd died trying to protect, and help Victoria escape justice for crimes that had hurt thousands of people. "Harold," Maya said quietly, "do you believe the evidence we found? Do you think my father really wrote that?" The old lawyer was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Maya, I've been practicing law for 45 years. I've seen every kind of fraud and deception imaginable. Your father's laptop, his journal entries, the handwriting analysis, it's all real. Your sister forged that will, stole your inheritance, and probably killed your father to cover it up. Then how can I take her money and call it justice?" Harold smiled sadly. "Because sometimes the system fails, Maya. Sometimes powerful people get away with terrible things because they have better lawyers and deeper pockets. Sometimes fighting for the truth costs more than anyone should have to pay." That evening, Maya sat alone in her apartment, staring at Victoria's settlement offer. $200,000 and her life back, in exchange for becoming complicit in her sister's crimes. Outside her window, she could see news vans still parked across the street, reporters waiting for any sign of the unstable sister who had dared to challenge a tech billionaire. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Walsh. "Maya, I found something. Can you meet me tomorrow? It's important." Maya almost deleted the message. She was exhausted from fighting, tired of being portrayed as crazy, sick of watching Victoria manipulate every situation to her advantage. The smart thing would be to take the settlement, disappear, and try to rebuild her life somewhere else. But then she remembered her father's journal entry. Maya doesn't know her own strength yet. She thinks Victoria is the successful one, because Victoria measures everything in dollars. But Maya measures things in lives changed, in children helped, in making the world better. Maya deleted the settlement offer without reading it again. Victoria might have more money, better lawyers, and the ability to manipulate public opinion. But Maya had something more powerful, the truth. And she wasn't giving up on her father's legacy, no matter what it cost her. The next morning, she called Jennifer Walsh back. "What did you find?" "Something that changes everything. Victoria made a mistake, Maya, a big one, and I know exactly how to prove it." Quote, "The final battle was about to begin, and Maya Chen was done running from it." Jennifer Walsh's discovery came from the most unlikely place, Victoria's own social media accounts. As a forensic accountant, Jennifer had been methodically analyzing Victoria's public statements, looking for any inconsistencies that might reveal her true activities. What she found was devastating in its simplicity. "Your sister documented her own crimes," Jennifer explained, spreading printouts across the conference table in Patricia's office. "She's so narcissistic, so confident in her own superiority, that she's been posting evidence of her fraud for years." The evidence was hidden in plain sight across Victoria's Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter accounts. A photo from March 2022 showed her wearing their father's vintage Rolex during a TechVision board meeting 2 months before his death. The caption read, "Wearing Dad's lucky watch for today's big announcement. He always said timing was everything in business." Another post from April 2022 showed Victoria at their father's desk in his home office, supposedly, quote, helping Dad with his estate planning. But Dr. Rodriguez's analysis of the laptop data proved their father was out of town that entire week, receiving medical treatment in Los Angeles. "She was in his house, at his computer, when he wasn't even there," Jennifer continued. "And she documented it herself, thinking she was showing how devoted she was to family business." But the most damning evidence came from a LinkedIn post Victoria had made just 3 days after their father's funeral. She'd shared a photo of herself signing documents, with the caption, "Even in grief, business continues, honored to be handling Dad's final wishes exactly as he intended." The timestamp on the post was crucial. According to the probate records, Victoria hadn't submitted the will to the court until 2 weeks after the funeral, but her social media showed her handling Dad's final wishes within days of his death, before any legitimate will could have been processed. "She's admitting to acting on a will before it was legally recognized," Patricia said, her eyes bright with excitement. "This proves premeditation. She knew exactly what that fake will contained because she created it herself." Dr. Rodriguez had meanwhile been conducting deeper analysis of the signature forgery. Using advanced digital forensics techniques, he'd discovered microscopic evidence that Victoria had used her father's electronic signature pad, a device Robert had used for digital contracts, to create perfect copies of his handwriting. The signature on the fake will shows pixel-perfect consistency because it was literally copied and pasted from legitimate documents, he explained. But here's the smoking gun. The metadata in Victoria's home computer system shows she accessed her father's electronic signature files 17 times in the week before his death. Agent Martinez had been building the federal case simultaneously, and the combination of Maya's evidence with the FBI's financial investigation was creating an unbreakable narrative. Victoria hadn't just forged a will, she'd been planning the theft for months, while simultaneously covering up massive corporate fraud. The breakthrough in the murder investigation came from an unexpected source, Victoria's personal assistant, Derek Chen, no relation to the family. Derek had been with TechVision for 3 years, handling Victoria's schedule, travel arrangements, and personal affairs. He'd remained loyal throughout the FBI investigation, but Jennifer's forensic analysis had revealed something that shook his faith in his employer. Derek contacted Maya through Harold, requesting a private meeting. They met at a small cafe in downtown Portland, Derek's hands shaking as he pulled out a manila folder. "I've been carrying this guilt for 8 months," he said quietly. "I thought I was protecting Ms. Victoria from grief, but now I understand what really happened." Derek's folder contained photocopies of Victoria's calendar and travel records from the weeks surrounding their father's death. The official story was that Victoria had been in New York when Robert suffered his heart attack. But Derek's records showed something different. "She flew to Portland the night before your father died," Derek revealed. "She told me it was a surprise visit, that she wanted to reconcile with him before it was too late. She made me book the flight under a false name and pay for it with cash from a Tech Vision slush fund." The timeline Derek provided was chilling. Victoria had arrived in Portland at 11 p.m. on Sunday. Robert Chen had died of his heart attack at 6 a.m. Monday morning. Victoria had flown back to New York by noon, establishing her alibi while her father's body was still warm. "But that's not the worst part," Derek continued, his voice barely audible. "2 days before she left for Portland, she asked me to research something. She wanted to know about digitalis poisoning, what it would look like, how it would affect someone with a heart condition, whether it would show up in a standard autopsy." Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Digitalis was a heart medication that could be lethal in high doses. In small amounts, it would cause exactly the kind of heart attack their father had suffered. "I thought she was researching it for a television show or something," Derek said, tears streaming down his cheeks. "She was always watching crime dramas. I never imagined she was planning to kill her own father." Patricia immediately contacted Agent Martinez with Derek's evidence. The combination of Victoria's secret trip to Portland, her research into digitalis poisoning, and the convenient timing of Robert's death created a compelling case for premeditated murder. But Victoria's arrogance provided the final nail in her coffin. During her media blitz defending herself against the fraud charges, she'd made a critical error. In an interview with 60 Minutes, she'd claimed she'd been in New York for the entire week of their father's death, providing detailed alibis and even showing receipts from New York restaurants. Derek's travel records proved every alibi was fabricated. Victoria had literally documented her own lies on national television. The federal grand jury met on a Thursday morning in late November. By noon, they had returned indictments on 17 federal charges: wire fraud, securities fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, forgery, and first-degree murder. The largest financial crime case in Oregon history had become something much more personal and devastating. Victoria's arrest was broadcast live on every major network. Maya watched from Patricia's office as federal agents led her sister out of her Manhattan penthouse in handcuffs, the same hands that had forged their father's will and possibly administered the poison that killed him. The media narrative shifted overnight. Suddenly, Victoria wasn't the successful businesswoman being persecuted by her unstable sister. She was a calculating killer who had murdered her own father for money. Maya transformed from villain to victim to hero in the space of a single news cycle. The inheritance lawsuit became a formality. With Victoria in federal custody and facing life in prison, her legal team had no leverage left. They settled within 2 weeks, agreeing to return Maya's full inheritance, plus punitive damages. But the money felt almost secondary now. Maya had uncovered the truth about her father's death, exposed her sister's crimes, and potentially saved thousands of Tech Vision investors from further fraud. She'd honored her father's faith in her, proving that character really was more valuable than profit. Standing outside the federal courthouse after Victoria's arraignment, Maya felt her father's presence more strongly than she had since his death. She'd become the woman he'd believed she could be, someone strong enough to fight for justice, no matter the cost. The scared, desperate teacher who had answered Harold Brewster's phone call was gone forever. In her place stood Maya Chen, millionaire heiress and guardian of her father's true legacy. The inheritance was just the beginning of her real work. 6 months after Victoria's conviction, Maya stood in the empty boardroom of what had once been TechVision Industries' headquarters in San Francisco. The sleek conference table where her sister had once commanded meetings worth hundreds of millions of dollars was now covered with architectural plans and educational program proposals. The company that had been built on fraud and manipulation was being transformed into something their father would have been proud of: the Robert Chen Foundation for Educational Excellence. The trial had been a media sensation, lasting 3 months and revealing the full scope of Victoria's crimes. The prosecution had presented evidence of systematic fraud dating back 7 years, affecting over 50,000 investors and 300 employees. Victoria's murder of their father had been the culmination of a pattern of ruthless behavior that had destroyed countless lives in pursuit of personal wealth. Maya had testified for 2 full days, walking the jury through her investigation from that first desperate phone call to Harold Brewster, through the discovery of her father's laptop, and Derek's devastating revelations about Victoria's secret trip to Portland. The courtroom had been silent as she described finding her father's journal entries, his growing awareness of Victoria's true nature, and his final, prophetic words about choosing character over profit. Victoria had shown no emotion throughout the trial, maintaining her innocence even as witness after witness described her calculated cruelty. When the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 17 counts, including first-degree murder, she had simply stood and smoothed her prison jumpsuit as if she were adjusting a business suit. The judge's words during sentencing had provided Maya with a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Ms. Victoria Chen, you have betrayed every trust placed in you. You murdered your father, defrauded thousands of investors, and attempted to destroy your sister's life to cover your crimes. Your actions represent the worst impulses of unchecked greed and narcissism. This court sentences you to life in prison, without the possibility of parole. But Maya's real journey had begun after the trial ended. Inheriting her father's estate had made her wealthy beyond anything she'd ever imagined. But wealth came with responsibilities she was still learning to navigate. The foundation was her first major decision, a way to honor her father's memory while addressing the educational inequities she'd witnessed as a teacher. Miss Chen, the architects are here for the final walkthrough, announced Sarah Kim, the foundation's newly hired executive director. Sarah had previously run educational nonprofits in San Francisco, and had been instrumental in helping Maya understand how to effectively deploy philanthropic resources. The renovation of TechVision's headquarters into the foundation's offices had taken 4 months. Where Victoria had once had a corner office with views of the Bay Bridge, Maya had created a teaching demonstration lab, where educators could learn and practice innovative instructional techniques. The executive boardroom had become a library filled with educational research and resources available to any teacher in the Bay Area. Maya walked through the space with the architects, approving final details for the grand opening scheduled for the following week. The foundation would officially launch with 3 major initiatives: emergency financial assistance for teachers facing economic hardship, grants for innovative educational technology, and a scholarship program for first-generation college students. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using Victoria's stolen wealth to help exactly the kind of people Victoria had considered expendable. Every dollar her sister had taken from investors and employees was being redirected toward education, toward building up rather than tearing down. Jennifer Walsh had agreed to serve as the foundation's chief financial officer, bringing her forensic accounting skills to bear on ensuring every donation was used effectively. Harold Brewster, though officially retired, had accepted a position on the board of directors, his decades of legal experience invaluable in navigating the complex regulations governing charitable organizations. Even Derek Chen had found redemption through the foundation. Despite his unwitting role in enabling Victoria's crimes, his genuine remorse and detailed cooperation with law enforcement had earned him community service rather than prison time. Maya had offered him a position as administrative coordinator, believing that people deserved second chances when they showed genuine commitment to change. The foundation's first major grant recipient was Lincoln Elementary School, where Maya had taught before her world fell apart. The $50,000 award would fund new classroom technology and provide salary supplements for teachers in high-need subjects. Maya had insisted on presenting the grant personally, returning to the school where her journey had begun. Principal Linda Rodriguez, who had reluctantly suspended Maya's teaching license during Victoria's campaign of harassment, was effusive in her apologies and gratitude. "Maya, I can't tell you how sorry I am for doubting you. We should have stood by you instead of believing those lies." Maya had forgiven Linda immediately, understanding how Victoria's manipulation had affected everyone around them. "You were protecting the children, which is exactly what you should have been doing. I don't blame anyone for Victoria's deception." The classrooms at Lincoln felt both familiar and foreign as Maya walked through them during her visit. She paused outside her old third-grade classroom, watching the current teacher work with a group of struggling readers. The scene brought back memories of why she'd chosen education in the first place. The moment when a child's face lit up with understanding. The gradual building of confidence in students who had been told they weren't smart enough. The privilege of being present when young minds discovered their own potential. "Miss Chen?" The voice belonged to Emma Walsh, Jennifer's daughter, now in 5th grade. Emma had been one of Maya's most challenging students, a bright child whose dyslexia had made traditional learning approaches ineffective. Under Maya's individualized instruction, Emma had not only learned to read, but had developed a genuine love of literature. "Emma, how are you doing, sweetheart?" "Mom told me you're starting a foundation to help teachers." "That's so cool. Are you going to help kids like me too?" The question struck Maya with its simplicity and insight. Emma understood intuitively what Maya was trying to accomplish, creating systems that supported both educators and the students they served, especially those who didn't fit traditional educational models. "That's exactly what we're going to do," Maya replied. "We're going to make sure every child has teachers who understand how they learn best." The Foundation's second major initiative addressed teacher housing, a critical issue in expensive urban areas like San Francisco. Maya had purchased a residential building in the Mission District, converting it into affordable housing specifically for educators. Teachers could rent apartments at 30% below market rate, allowing them to live in the communities where they worked, rather than commuting hours from distant suburbs. The building's community room hosted monthly gatherings where teachers from different schools could share resources and strategies. Maya often attended these meetings, not as the wealthy founder of the foundation, but as a former teacher who understood the daily challenges of the profession. "Maya, you should consider returning to the classroom," suggested Maria Santos, a 2nd-grade teacher from Roosevelt Elementary. "These kids need to see successful role models who look like them and understand their struggles." The idea had been percolating in Maya's mind for weeks. Despite her new wealth and responsibilities, she missed the immediate impact of direct teaching. The foundation was important work, but there was something irreplaceable about the daily interaction with children, the moment-by-moment decisions that shaped young lives. "I've actually been thinking about that," Maya admitted. "Maybe not full-time, but perhaps teaching a few classes while running the foundation." The criminal trial had also led to massive civil litigation against Victoria's estate. Defrauded investors had filed lawsuits seeking to recover their losses, and the legal proceedings had revealed additional assets Victoria had hidden in offshore accounts. Maya had worked with prosecutors to ensure that recovered funds went first to victims rather than to her inheritance. This decision had surprised many legal observers, who expected Maya to claim every available dollar. But she had learned from her father that true wealth came from using resources to benefit others, not from accumulating as much as possible for personal gain. The offshore accounts contained an additional $47 million that Victoria had stolen from TechVision's employee pension fund. Rather than fight for a share of these funds, Maya had waived any claim, ensuring the money could be returned to the workers whose retirements Victoria had jeopardized. This gesture had earned Maya respect throughout the business community and had attracted additional donors to the foundation. Philanthropists who might have been skeptical of a nouveau riche educational charity were impressed by Maya's principled approach to wealth distribution. The foundation's third major initiative was perhaps the most personal, a program providing college scholarships specifically for children who had lost parents to violence or crime. Maya understood the trauma of losing a parent under traumatic circumstances, and she wanted to ensure that such losses didn't also destroy children's educational opportunities. The scholarship recipients included children of Victoria's victims, young people whose parents had lost their life savings to TechVision's fraud or had suffered stress-related health crises from financial devastation. Maya met personally with each scholarship recipient, sharing her own story of loss and resilience, while emphasizing that their parents' suffering had not been in vain. One recipient, Marcus Williams, was the son of a TechVision employee who had died by suicide after losing his entire pension to Victoria's theft. Marcus was academically gifted, but had been working multiple jobs to support his younger siblings after his father's death. "Ms. Chen, I don't understand why you're helping us," Marcus said during their first meeting. "Your sister destroyed my family. Why would you want to fix what she broke?" Maya had thought carefully about her response, knowing that Marcus needed honesty rather than platitudes. Because someone has to take responsibility for repairing the damage. Victoria never will. She's still claiming she did nothing wrong, but I inherited more than money from my father. I inherited an obligation to use that money to make things better. The foundation's grand opening drew national media attention, with reporters eager to see how the victim sister had transformed her inherited wealth. Maya had been careful to craft a media strategy that focused on the foundation's mission rather than on Victoria's crimes, though the contrast was unavoidable. Standing before an audience of teachers, students, and community leaders, Maya delivered the speech she had been preparing for months. "My father believed that education was the foundation of everything good in society. He built his company to create technology that would help people learn and grow. When that mission was corrupted by greed and criminality, it became my responsibility to restore his vision." She paused, looking out at faces that represented the communities the foundation would serve. The Robert Chen Foundation isn't just about providing money for educational programs. It's about rebuilding trust in institutions, demonstrating that wealth can be a force for good, and proving that even the worst betrayals can't destroy the possibility of redemption. The audience included several of Maya's former students, now in middle and high school, who had followed her story through the media coverage of Victoria's trial. Seeing their faces reminded her of why education had always been her calling, not just her career. After the ceremony, Maya visited her father's grave for the first time since Victoria's sentencing. She had avoided the cemetery during the legal proceedings, feeling too raw and angry to find peace there. But now, with the foundation launched and her new life taking shape, she was ready to speak with him again. The headstone was simple granite with his name, dates, and the inscription Maya had chosen: "Beloved father, visionary leader, believer in human potential." She had added fresh flowers and sat quietly for several minutes before speaking aloud. "Dad, I think I finally understand what you meant about measuring success differently than Victoria. She counted dollars and market share, but you were counting lives changed and potential realized. I'm trying to do the same now." She told him about the foundation, about the teachers they were helping, about the students who would receive scholarships. She described the converted headquarters where his company's resources were being used to build rather than exploit, to educate rather than manipulate. "I know you would have preferred that Victoria chose a different path. I know you loved her despite what she became. But I promise you that your legacy is safe now. The work you started, the belief in education and human dignity, it's going to continue." As Maya prepared to leave the cemetery, she felt a sense of completion that had eluded her throughout the legal battle. She had not only recovered her inheritance and secured justice for Victoria's victims, she had discovered her own purpose and strength. The frightened, desperate teacher who had taken Harold Brewster's phone call 18 months earlier had evolved into a confident leader capable of creating meaningful change. Walking back to her car, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had lost a sister to her own evil choices, but she had gained a deeper understanding of her father's values and her own capacity for resilience. She had inherited wealth, but more importantly, she had inherited responsibility, and she was determined to use both wisely. The foundation was just the beginning. Maya had plans for expanded programs, additional facilities, and partnerships with universities and government agencies. She wanted to create a model for how inherited wealth could be deployed to address systemic problems, rather than simply accumulated for personal comfort. But perhaps most importantly, Maya had decided to return to teaching. Not as a desperate substitute grateful for any work, but as an educator with the resources and influence to advocate for systemic change. She would teach part-time while running the foundation, bringing her experience with both poverty and wealth to help children understand that their circumstances didn't define their potential. That evening, Maya stood in the foundation's library, surrounded by educational research and curriculum materials that would soon be available to teachers throughout the region. She thought about her father's final journal entry, his faith that she would measure success in lives changed rather than dollars accumulated. Looking out the window at the San Francisco skyline, Maya Chen, teacher, philanthropist, guardian of her father's true legacy, smiled with the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had honored that faith. The inheritance Victoria had tried to steal had become something far more valuable than money. It had become the foundation for a life of purpose and service. The woman who had once taken the job nobody wanted had become someone who created opportunities others could only dream of. And in doing so, she had proven that character really was the most valuable inheritance of all. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.